Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 209 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Colin Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can LGBT plus youth heal and thrive. And it's Saturday the 3rd of June 2023 as I record this. So this is definitely a really great podcast episode that I really enjoy writing about and actually re-recording, because this is a very important topic for anyone. And even though this is focused on LGBT plus people, this can apply to straight people, because everyone needs resilience. And resilience is absolutely critical to people's mental health. So what we're doing today is that we're focusing on discrimination as a bit of social psychology, resilience, and how that develops across the human lifespan, especially adolescence. It's a bit of developmental psychology there, and then we're also looking at mental health, so clinical psychology. So we really are looking at everything. This is definitely an important episode if you are LGBT plus, because because of the discrimination, mass shootings, and everything else I talk about in the podcast episode is definitely a heavy burden at times. Like seeing it all, and it really can chip away at your mental health, especially when people just want to argue because they aren't even willing to understand why things affect you like the way they are. So it's really interesting, very important, and this is a great topic, so I really hope that you enjoy it. And as always, you can always share your thoughts and feelings on today's episode by emailing me, connorwhiteley.net. You can always either come to the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post at Connor Whiteley, psychology author. I always love to hear from you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation, and I really do love talking about this sort of stuff though, so please definitely get in touch. And today's episode has been sponsored by Developmental Psychology, a guide to developmental and child psychology. So the reason why this is a great sponsor for today's episode is not only because we're looking at developmental psychology. So this great, really easy to understand book, it talks about cognitive development, how a player develops, and my absolute favourite topic, cross-cultural development. That's just such a brilliant chapter. But the book also talks about resilience, poverty, and a bunch of other factors that you really do impact, like today's episode. So this is important. And if you want to understand how a child develops, both a neurotypical and a neurodivergent person, then this is really engaging and easy to understand book to help you boost your knowledge. So that's Developmental Psychology, a guide to developmental and child psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, or local library if you request it. And you can get the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Colin Whiteley. So what was the buying books, sponsors of the creation and the editing of the podcast. My time in creating the show is sponsored by my wonderful patrons, and a massive thank you to all of my patrons, because it shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. And if you wanted to get tons of other great benefits, like early access to the podcast, closer relationship with me as the podcast creator, and a lot of behind the scene footage and other material, then you can also become a patron at patreon.com/ the Psychology World podcast. So let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how can LGBT plus youth learn to heal and thrive. This is a great episode that I'm really excited about, and it's really nice to actually take a look at stuff from the developmental psychology perspective for change. And as I mentioned in the last podcast episode, please note that for the rest of the podcast episode, except in the titles will be like this one, I'm going to be using the terms gay and LGBT plus interchangeably and to mean the same thing, just because it's easier to say on the podcast and it's also easier for me to write during the blog post. So if I offend you, I'm sorry. So let's dive into this great episode. Why do LGBT plus youth need resilience? I've covered before on the podcast that everyone needs resilience. However, it could be argued that gay youth need more resilience than non-gay youth because of the discrimination, mass shootings and acts of mass violence encountered by members of this community. For example, the mass shooting at Club Q in the USA in 2022. And this is a mere drop in the ocean of every single act of legislative and mass violence portrayed against the gay community. This is important for psychologists to take note of because the discrimination goes hand in hand with the oppression, and this in turn leads to increased suicide rates amongst gay youth. How would it in all 2020? Therefore, gay youth need to learn resilience and learn to thrive in this world so this fear, oppression and active discrimination don't begin to control them or define them as a person. In addition, everyone can help to create a safer world for everyone at school, the workplace and at home. This can be done by creating a more inclusive space, as well as adults can nurture resilience in all gay youth, so these youth can have the increased capacity to navigate the biases against them, heal and thrive. That is the most important thing about this episode. I want to give every gay youth the ability to thrive in life. Furthermore, a lot of people might think that resilience is just another term for grit, and that everyone should just show through. I do understand that that is a very bad definition, but resilience is a lot more than that, because resilience needs to be nurtured through making sure that a gay youth has supportive relationships and environments where they feel safe. That is just critical. Personally, this is what I've always been extremely grateful to my best friends like growing up, because they were amazing. They flat out amazing. Because no matter what happened, what was said about my community, or anything else, they made sure that I was okay, loved and supported. And that is why I am a resilient person, first and foremost, and I call myself a survivor. In addition, resilience starts by valuing young gay youth and affirming that they're okay. And this is something that I cannot stress enough, and honestly, to me this does sound stupid now, but it is also so true. Simply telling a gay person that they're okay, there's nothing wrong with them, and that they shouldn't have to hear the hate is so powerful. It is actually the reason why I cried so much during Heartstopper on Netflix. Because that show said everything that I've always wanted to hear, but of course no one ever said that to me. Linking the resilience of LGBT plus youth to developmental psychology. Focusing on developmental psychology content here, a person's affirmations depend entirely on their identity. This is a critical part of adolescence, where every single teenager learns who they are, and their identity is central to the mental health of all teens, regardless of sexuality. Also, I have to mention it here that when I talk about gender identity, this is the social construct, and this is completely different to biological sex. Therefore, developmentally speaking, gender identity for everyone develops over time, and adults can affirm a gender identity by learning the use of pronouns depending on what they want to be called. And believe me, this really does take some practice, and it's perfectly okay. Because one of the biggest right-wing myths I think here is that transgender and non-binary people get angry if you make a mistake. In my experience, this is not true in the slightest, and they only get angry if you're being intentionally a horrible person. Yet one of my author friends is like non-binary, and I learned that because I call them her, because they were a biological woman, so I just assumed on the book recommendation that I was writing. But were they mad? No, of course not. All I got was a very polite email in my inbox asking me to change the she in the book recommendation to they, and it wasn't hard. I did it, they were happy, and when I was promoting a new kick I started done by the author, I used the pronouns correctly, and I almost didn't by mistake, but I was trying to be respectful because that's their choice. And that is what this is all about. And if you make a mistake, no one cares as long as you're respectful enough to learn from it. And I will admit, and tons of others will too, that this really does take practice to use the them, they pronouns for a single person, because it goes against every single grammar rule. And yes, even when I was actually writing this post, I did have to change some of my sentence structures just so it made sense. Yet, in all honesty, when it comes to making a younger person feel safe, loved, and valued, no one should care about a grammar structure and words. What's the research on LGBT plus youth? Moreover, when it comes to the evidence base, a Gallup poll mentioned that Generation Z are 7 times more likely than baby boomers to identify as LGBT+. Yet, please remember that this is just up from a tiny sample of the population at the start. As well as 3.5% to 27% of teens are transgender, non-binary, or otherwise non-conforming in the USA. Drower and all 2022. But I will note that this isn't a nationally representative sample, and of course this is only from the US. Nonetheless, of course this increased gender diversity seriously does not make society any safer for gay youth, and as much as I didn't want to actually pick on the US, considering the amount of anti-gay laws that have been introduced so far in 2023, some of the graphics are just scary, this same author friend actually shared one, and some states, I would not travel to some states in America, just because I would rather not go there, make sure I'm safe, and yeah, it's honestly a dangerous time, I would say. So again, back to the blog post, society is that far from safe for gay youth, and I am seriously scared to learn about the number of suicides whenever someone actually decides to study them, especially in Florida. That honestly scares me. All because the discrimination and trauma are widespread, leading to increased rates of mental health difficulties, suicide, homelessness, and physical health concerns too. Moreover, when it comes to the school environment, transgender youth are 2 times more likely to be bullied than cisgender youth, and 29% of them have been injured or threatened with a weapon at a school, and that is disgusting. Also, as of 2022 in the USA, 60% of adults believe, and remember this is public belief, not fact, that gender is determined by sex at birth, increasing by 6% from 2017. Parker and all 2022. As well as whilst about 2/3 believe that transgender people need to be protected in law against the discrimination, a majority still believe that progress towards trans rights far enough or too far entirely, resulting in some US states limiting the healthcare these people are able to receive. Something I find quite beyond disgusting because, the whole point of doctors, the whole point of healthcare is to treat anyone because it's a human right. Why is that? Because according to the UN, every single person has a human right to healthcare. So the fact that someone isn't able to get certain bits of healthcare just because they're transgender is disgusting. They're people at the end of the day. How can LGBT plus youth resilience be nurtured? Moving on to the unofficial tip section of the podcast episode, I want to mention that a recent study found a massive way that adults and others can support a gay youth is to use the correct pronouns to affirm their identity, usually having a respectful conversation about their LGBT plus identity, and this was found to reduce suicide attempts by 40%. That's massive. And I can personally say that having that simple conversation about their gay identity is so powerful in making a youth or anyone, for that matter, feel respected. And yeah, I would love to have that conversation with my family, but it hasn't happened yet. Furthermore, another way to nurture and respect gay youths are to respect their expression, be it through clothing or hairstyle choices. Because seriously, how does what a kid wears impact or make the family look bad? Because that's some of the typical stuff I hear, and it's like, does it really matter? Like, is this going to harm you? Is this going to injure you? Is this going to kill you? No. Also, adults learning about LGBT plus issues instead of thinking they know everything is really important too. And this is a massive problem for some of the people that I know because they moan and groan and they completely invalidate me and my community, thinking that they know everything, like everything possible about an LGBT plus issue, when in reality, every single thing they say is wrong. I just have to force myself not to laugh because I wouldn't mind. Like, I love debating this stuff because there's definitely some debates that we should have, but you have to have an informed position about them. It's like a different psychology topics, like is nature versus nurture like the best one? Of course, that's a false argument because, of course, all behaviour is an interaction between the environment and the biology. Two different sense, but you get what I mean though, like you have to be knowledgeable about both perspectives. Again, my problem isn't that they don't know the stuff, it is how they pretend to know everything about me because I'm gay, and are continuing to completely disregard me and my community, and apparently that doesn't impact me at all. Oh, it seriously does. Annoys me more than I want to admit. Anyway, yeah, just having a conversation between parents, welcoming their partners, and creating a positive environment can reduce suicidal thoughts as well. Conclusion. As we start to wrap up today's podcast episode, I want to say that regardless of their sexuality, youths and teenagers need adults to act as their guardrails as they journey towards adulthood. This means enforcing healthy habits and limits, but never when it comes to identity, be it sexuality or gender. Since, come on, every single youth hates a screen time limit, but it is just being part of a teenager, and there is no problem with limits like that. Yet when an adult or another teenager, for that matter, so questions or wants to debate the very existence of a teen's identity, then that is not okay. Since they can start a teenager towards hating themselves and to their lives, leading to mental health difficulties, and in the worst situation, suicide. No one will ever lie and say that nurturing resilience in a child is easy. It's not. due to part of it is that an adult of another teenager admitting their own mistakes and learning from them, be it when they didn't use the right name, and that's linking to the idea of dead naming when it comes to a transgender person. That's a really interesting topic, quite heartbreaking, but it is interesting. Or often any type of physique support term. When this happens, saying sorry can be hard, as that can allyship. However, these mistakes can simply be overcome by correcting ourselves in the moment, or listening and learning at times. And it's that willingness to listen that I think is so powerful. And it's why I have such time and dedication to certain people, because they're willing to listen, so I'm more than willing to listen to them back. Everyone needs to make sure that we create a safe space for gay youth to be themselves, valued, and they can thrive once they have cultivated the most important sense of resilience. Finally, of course, societal change will always be a fight and ongoing, considering that most of the time it feels like society seeks to criminalise, restrict healthcare, and simply deny that LGBT plus youths exist in the first place. This will always be an uphill battle. Yet the most important change that will benefit in the short term and in day-to-day interactions is so much simpler and easier than everyone would ever believe. Just be kind, respectful, and validating, and you really never know, you might have just saved a life and put a gay youth on the path to becoming resilient, healing, and thriving. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I'm definitely still learning to talk about this sort of stuff and put in some of my own personal feelings on it. So it's definitely a great learning opportunity for me. I really hope that you got something out of it though, because this isn't spoken about in mainstream society. So that's what I'm trying to do this month though. It's actually just trying to spread some of this knowledge. So if you know someone who enjoyed today's episode, then please share it for them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more about developmental psychology, then definitely check out Developmental Psychology, a guide to developmental and child psychology, available in all of the usual places. And if you wanted to become a patron of the show, then please check out patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.